Coming up on today's episode of the Salesman podcast.
Passion is the emotional connection to something, right? So if you're not emotionally connected, you can't be passionate. So I'd ask you, why are you selling it? Why are you doing it?
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman podcast, and welcome to today's episode. On today's show, we have the return of Jim Keenan for multiple times now. I enjoy him because he is passionate and he's obviously got great knowledge in the sales arena. And today we're talking about passion. We're talking about how it can be used as a sales tool and how we should all have perhaps a bit more passion in our lives. You can find out more about Keenan over at asalesguy.com. Everything else we talk about is in the show notes over at salesman.red. And so with that all said, let's jump in to today's episode. Hey Keenan, and welcome back to the Salesman podcast.
Hey, my man, welcome. Glad to be back. I'm honored. It's been only like a couple of months. I feel special.
Good. You should feel special because it's quite a rarity that we have someone back on so soon. And it was off the back of your last show that I wanted to get you on and to dive into today's topic because you made a real impact with me, Keenan. And it wasn't necessarily your knowledge or your insights, which of course are excellent with your experience, and we appreciate that. But it was that you came across just with this fiery passion, and you were almost like spitting bars, so to speak, with the and I don't know whether it's practiced and verbatim or what, but you came across like amazingly well, and we got so much content out of that episode as well, being able to break down your almost like rants into smaller chunks. So I wanted to get you back on to talk about passion. And where I want to start, a massively leading question, of course, but could passion be one of the most underutilized sales tools that salespeople are just not using as well as they should be?
Unequivocally, look, no questions asked. It's absolutely underused, but I'm going to say it's underused as a life tool, right? I mean, I don't want to get going too far down, into this thing too fast, but the bottom line is, for me, my definition, I'm probably going to go do some research on this now, but I don't think I'll be too far off, is passion is the emotional connection to something, right? So if you're not emotionally connected, you can't be passionate. So I'd ask you, why are you selling it? Why are you doing it? If you're not emotionally connected to what you're doing, why are you doing it?
You've my second question here, and I'll read it out verbatim, and 3 questions in, the questions go out the window, but my second question is, putting aside sales for a second, are people generally subdued in life in general? So I'm glad you've already touched on this because this is where I wanted the conversation to go. And why is that? Why do you think that perhaps people are subdued in a certain extent? And why aren't we attaching emotion to more things and, living with more passion? And of course, this will spread over to sales later on.
I think there's a lot of reasons, right? So I definitely think for sure some people's personalities don't exude passion in the terms that we necessarily define it, and they could be passionate. So, I don't have the research or the data to prove this, but I certainly feel there's some very passionate people whose outward expression isn't what we define as passion. And so I'm not really sure how to categorize them. I think their passion comes out in maybe the amount of work they put in, the amount of effort they put into delivering their services. I'd be willing to guess, again, this is all, anecdotal hyperbole, not anecdotal, but I think they may also, their end product may be stronger and better because of that passion to drive it out, but they're not going to be the expressive that we normally associate with passion. So I think we need to include that there are some people who are not emotionally expressive with passion. But outside of those people whose personality doesn't fit, yes, I believe most people don't live life with passion. I believe most people are afraid of passion because passion can be seen. Passion is a statement, right? When you're passionate, you're getting behind something emotionally and you're standing behind it. And if you either truly don't believe it or you're afraid of being called out, you're afraid of being wrong, or you don't want attention brought to you, you better not be passionate because all of that comes with that. And I don't think people are really comfortable being in the spotlight or comfortable standing that far behind something. I think they like the idea. They always have an escape route. So if I'm not completely passionate about something, then I have an escape route. And if someone challenges me or it doesn't go right or I was wrong, I wasn't really that far behind it, right? I don't have to be held accountable. I think accountability or lack thereof plays a huge role in the level of somebody's passion.
So I want to come on to the personality side of things in a second because I perhaps fall into that second category that we mentioned then. But being afraid, I think it's worth stopping on this for a second. Because is there a chicken and egg scenario here, though, of it's perhaps difficult to become passionate about something until you trust implicitly, you know it inside out, and you really care about it. And then, it's difficult to care about it until you're passionate about it. Should we just be more willing to throw ourselves all in and, again, putting sales aside for a second and just be more authentic and open, and I guess open is the word, and accepting of challenges and willing to put ourselves on the line? Is that where we're going wrong with all of this?
That's a really good question, and I think there is some chicken and the egg going on here. But as you were asking the question, I was processing it in my head, and one of the things that jumped out is I think a lot of people have a passion about something, right? A lot of times, though, their passion is not aligned with their career. So if you start getting them to start, sit next to someone on a plane, right, and ask them what they do, and like, I'm a salesperson for Oracle. Oh yeah, I run this region. And then you talk a little more, like, oh yeah, I just got back from Colombia and I did this trip and I windsurfed, and they won't stop talking, and all their arms start flying around. So they're passionate about that, right? So I think there are some things in life that we're passionate about that don't necessarily rise to the occasion with strangers, but the people close to you know. So which then leads you to suggest that if I'm in a job that I'm not passionate about, I got there slowly but surely, and I really shouldn't be there. And so I may know it, but I don't really know it enough. I don't really have a desire to go 10 layers deep. And if I don't have a desire to go 10 layers deep, then I do feel insecure that if I try to get too passionate about it, I'll be seen as a fraud. So I think there's a lot of that there that, look, I've said this a couple times. We move through life one small decision at a time, usually starting around high school, like in America, that's like junior in high school, senior in high school. We start making life decisions. When you're 10, 11, 12, 9, 8, very few decisions you make then mess with your entire life. When you get about 16, not many of them do, but you are in a position to start making decisions that affect the rest of your life. Who your friend is, if you start drinking, if you start doing drugs, if you choose to quit the football team, start the football team, really focus on your grades, not focus on your grades, decide to go to college, not decide to college, which college you go to. All of those decisions starting at 16 start to dictate your life. And what happens is, in many cases, I believe this to my heart, we start making decisions based on what society tells us we should do. I got to go to college. I can't just sit around and do nothing. I can't, spend a year in another country just partying on the beach. I have to get into this particular college. I have to be married by the time I'm 27. I have to make this money. I need this car, right? And so we make these little tiny decisions as we go along. And then one day we wake up and realize we're really not very happy in our job. We're really not very happy in our marriage. We're really not very happy in a whole bunch of things. And so we're not passionate for sure. But guess what? Each one of those decisions is like a little brick in this wall or fence that all of a sudden you wake up one day and you can't see over it. And it's built you completely in, and now you can't get out. And so I think that plays a huge role in the lack of passion in our lives. People pen themselves in, and by the time they realize they've penned themselves in, getting out is a monstrous effort that's overwhelming, so they just stay in the pen.
Because this ties into emotions as well, because clearly, I'll speak for myself rather than offending everyone that's listening and yourself, but when I was 16, I was an idiot. When I was 21, I was probably a drunker idiot. When I was 20, so I'm 29 now. When I was 28, 20, even last year when I was starting up the podcast, I was still an idiot of the business decisions that I made and the angles that I took. And it's only now that it's all starting to funnel down and work for us, and we're seeing the rapid growth that I've wanted the whole process along. And I'm sure when I'm 35, I'll look back and think, Will, you're a dickhead, listening back to this episode and thinking I'm on my high horse now at 29. So with that, emotion ties into all of this, because if you take emotion out of the picture and you look at it very pragmatically and very literally, it's very easy to say, hey, I'm in this sales role. Perhaps I like sales, but I'm in the wrong role, selling the wrong product. It's very easy to say, when you take emotion out of the picture, let me just move to another job. Or perhaps sales isn't right for me. Or perhaps there's people that aren't listening and should be listening to this episode, and they're in some horrible accounting job and they're going, I'd actually like to be selling accounting services or whatever it is. So when you take emotion out of the picture, it's easy to make these claims, but when emotion's wrapped into it and you're going, well, you're getting emotionally tied into, I've got my mortgage, or perhaps the audience have kids, perhaps they don't, they've got other things that they need that income to bring in. Is there, again, there's a chicken and egg scenario here of, do you leave your job to go to a more passionate job, or do you try and tie in passion to where you are now because you feel like you're committed to it, whether you're not?
No, you can't. You can't create passion where it doesn't exist. Look, I get I got a job, I got a mortgage, I got kids, I got a house, I got all that. And if you have all of that and you're in a job that you have to pay all those bills because you bought a house that costs so much and you have 2 new cars and you have this and you have that, I feel you. And every one of those things you have is that brick wall that I'm talking about, right? So really, the emotion comes in your ability to check yourself and say, why do I have all this stuff? How is this making me happy? Is it making me happy? If it is, keep going. I'm not going to judge. I'm not here to judge, right? But if it's not, get real with yourself. Like, here's a perfect example. And I don't think I've told many people this. When I started a sales guy, I had started it literally 3 months before getting separated and getting divorced, right? And so, my ex-wife was a stay-at-home mom, and I had 3 kids, and I did really well in the jobs I had before then. So when we went to court, they basically tied my compensation for her for over a 4-year period to what I made before. But I wasn't making that now. So I had one of 2 choices right then and there. I could go back to the corporate world, and I could keep making that money and not do a sales guy anymore. And then I'd have the money to buy a new house because we got divorced. We sold the house we were in together, that I could keep buying new cars. I could do all this stuff, right, and pay her. Or I said I could take the chance and start this. But guess what? That means I don't get a new car anymore. That means I'm renting a house now instead of buying a new house. That means I can't do this. I can't do that. And that was but I asked myself, what's going to make me happy? Where am I going to be happy? Am I going to be happy with this car when I drive up somewhere, Mr. Single Guy? Or I'm going to be happier getting up in the morning every single day. So I had to make a difficult decision. And don't get me wrong, there's been some tough times like, man, this sucks. Not just keep building more blocks around me. So the same thing I would say to anybody listening here, start taking 1 block off at a time. If you get 2 cars with big payments, trade them in, go to a lower payment, or suck it up until you get it, and then don't get a new car. Ride that car into the ground, right? I asked you another question. Are you going on a vacation every year? Stop going on the vacation. Bring it down. Give yourself a 1-year strategy, and then go get the job you love. But get off the hamster wheel. Get off the hamster wheel. There's no passion on a hamster wheel because you're not going anywhere.
So, and to add a bit of context for the listeners, for me as well, I mean, I went from pretty much the best medical device sales role in the UK, a really prestigious company, family-owned $1 billion revenue company, and I literally moved in with one of my mates from uni while I started what we were doing. I didn't have a car for a year. I now got a Mazda RX-8, which I love, but that's still an extremely cheap car for what it is. And I've got no intentions of, splashing out on that front because all my funds goes back into growing our audience through the business and that side of things. But I took a lot of sacrifice from not going out, from living somewhere that I didn't really want to live. Who at 28 wants to live with another bloke who's like 30 odd and he's a primary school teacher kind of thing. And, I'm willing to take those risks. That's part of my personality. But, and this is where I want to ask, and then we'll move on from this point. What led you to make that decision? Because decisions clearly happen in the moment, in an instant, but the build-up of the decision could take years. And for me, it was being unhappy with the managers that were changing around and who was managing me in the company and the role that was changing, and my territory was getting messed around and I was losing awesome customers and gaining really shitty ones, and there's politics going on, and I'm just not a good salesperson from a manager perspective because I'm always a pain in the arse. So all these were building up, and then eventually led me, my mum was getting sicker and sicker, and so that led me to then say, sod this, I want to be able to go home and see my mum when the time that we had left, whenever I could, if that makes sense. So that was a strong decision for me to then, that pushed me over the edge to stop the corporate role and start doing the podcast. But for you, Keenan, and for using your knowledge and reference points of other people as well, what causes that final decision? What's the breaking point? Because if we can move that sooner, further forward in our lives, and make that decision that leads us on a path of passion, we're compounding those years of passion up that are available to us.
I love your story, and we're getting real personal on this whole thing. Both of us are dropping all kinds of stories, right? Which I think is the best. I mean, look, when you can really get raw, that's the best. So my story's not much different than yours, right? I mean, I'm 20 years older than you, so I had a lot more stuff building up. But same thing. I had managers. I had one particular instance where I was working for a company. I was crushing it for them. I was VP of sales for a particular division. My team was crushing it. There was another division that wasn't doing too well. So the COO said, you know what, Keenan, I'm moving you from here to over here, and we're taking the guy who's sucking and putting him on your team. Well, the guy who got moved from the sucky team to my team made $1 million that next year because my team was doing so well. He made $1 million, and I lost money because I was trying to build his team up. And I was like, how did that just happen? How did I just get penalized $1 million because I was doing such a good job? I'll never forget that. And so there's so many examples of that I got to the point where I couldn't wait for Friday. When Friday came, I was so excited. Saturday came. By Saturday night, I was already stressed out not because Sunday was tomorrow, but because I knew Monday was coming after Sunday. I couldn't even get through the whole weekend because Monday was that close. So I was like, I can't do this. I was miserable, Will. I was miserable. And so I think that plus what I call self-awareness. You really have to be self-aware about why do you want the car? Why do you want the house? Why do you live where you live? Why do you not have the money you want? Why can't you leave? You really have to be very self-aware.
And why do people want those things? What's the stereotype perhaps of why a salesperson wants a big car or, flashy watch?
I don't think it's just salespeople. I think it's everybody in general, right? I think most people live well beyond their means if you define it by the ability to retire at a certain age and have money in the bank and be saving a percentage. And I think it's our culture, right? It's our culture that says you need to live in a certain neighborhood. I mean, we have this idea of being the best in everything, right? Even people who make a lot of money, my kid goes to the best school. I got my kid. Oh, my kid was on the waiting list and he got into this school. Oh, my kid, he's on the A team in soccer, not the B team, right? I mean, we're constantly competing in this country, constantly with our kids, with our jobs, with our cars, with our communities. Oh, where do you live? Oh, yeah, I live in this. Oh, I heard that's a great neighborhood. And in terms of friend, well, that neighborhood's going down. I mean, it's constant competition.
And why? Why go that one step deeper with this? Why do we strive to it?
I think we're insecure. I think this whole idea that America is, the land of opportunity, and if I haven't reached that opportunity, there must be something wrong with me. And if there's something wrong with me, then I don't like the feeling of that. So I want to put on airs that I am successful, that I have made it, that I'm not whatever, right? And I think there are layers to that, right? I mean, if you live in a middle-income neighborhood where the average salary is $60,000, $50,000 a year, you're competing with them. You're not going into the neighborhood across the way to make $150 to compete with them, and those in the $150 aren't going to the neighborhood with $5 million and trying to compete with them. But in each of those sub-pockets, they're all trying to compete constantly, which keeps them over their skis. And they just, so I think you need to be confident and comfortable. You need to be okay. And look, I think we all have it. The messages we get from media every day, trust me, I feel it too. I absolutely feel it. And I just fight it. I fight it every day. I am refusing to put myself in a position where I have to do something I don't want to do to make ends meet.
And should that be the goal with all of this? Either using your language then of not having to do something that you don't want to make ends meet, or perhaps another way of looking at it would be to be financially independent so then you can choose to do what you want. Should that be because this is something I'm passionate about, should this be our end goal with our sales jobs?
It should be the end goal with life. And so whether it's a sales job, I mean, I know it's about sales, we keep bringing it back here, but this bridges well beyond sales, right? If you are in a position in any way, shape, or form where you have to do something, or you can't do something you want that's within reason. Okay, look, I know friends with millionaires who would love to have, a $10 million house slopeside of Vail, who would love to have a place in Monaco. I don't know, right? And they can't. Okay, there's a lie, but if they really want it, they'll figure out how to get it. But when it comes to making decisions about how you live your life, not acquiring purchases, but if you want to live on the beach and start a bar, then why are you living in Ohio as an accountant? Why are you doing that? Right? You got to really reconcile that with yourself. There's nothing wrong with owning a bar on the beach in Costa Rica. Nothing wrong with that at all. So why aren't you there? And don't tell me, well, you got kids in this. No, those are all excuses. Every one of those is an excuse. So if you are doing what you want to do, right, not owning what you want to own. But if you're not doing what you want to do, then you're not living the life that you want to live.
So I have a slightly different take on this, Keenan, and I wrote a pretty hefty blog post about this, and it's something that I'm increasingly passionate about, and that is sales along with entrepreneurship is one of the only, one of two careers essentially, there may be more, but that are applicable in my mind, that allow you to increase your income with the amount of hours and your skill set very directly. So I feel sales puts you in a great opportunity to say, which is what I've done in the past, of I'm going to work my ass off for 5 years or however long it is, that's going to give me then the resources to then go and do what I want to do afterwards. Do you agree that that is a good, and this may be more applicable for, if we've got a millennial audience, people who are listening who are in their 20s versus people who are in their 60s, but is sacrificing, and that's a heavy word, 3, 4, 5 years of your life to build assets, to whether you buy property or whether you have it in the bank or whatever, it gives you that security, to sacrifice a bunch of time to then give yourself more flexibility in the future, is that a viable option, or should we conversely be just doing a job day to day and a role and living where we want and doing everything right now for the moment that what we want? Should we be planning ahead or just being right here now?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Excuse me. Okay, I'm not sure they're mutually inclusive. So this is how I look at it. When you first described it, working 5 years, make a bunch of money, and create the financial resources. Well, one of the things that really frustrates me when it comes to the idea of money and being successful, everybody focuses on the top line. Everybody focuses on the top line. But really, the quote-unquote, the resources aren't the top line. And it's what's left over after expenses. So yes, if you want to be a salesperson and you want to make as much money as possible and you're living like a pauper, then okay. And if you figured 5 years is the way to do that, great. If you could have done that in 3 years and moved in with a buddy instead of had your own place, then do it for 3 years. And if you're doing it because you're good at it and you like it enough because you're looking at it as a stepping stone, then I would do that no different than working out in the gym to build your body, right? You don't necessarily like working out, but the end result is what you want. So you have to do that. So I have no problem with that type of sacrifice, i.e., I'm going to do something that's going to get me to a place. But the flip side, if the do something in the now because I like to do it now, but it'll never get me to where I want to get to tomorrow, then that's a slightly different story because you have to ask yourself, well, if you like what you're doing today, why do you want to do that tomorrow? What's different about that? Is that a next chapter, et cetera? And just be very self-aware and reconcile the competing needs. Like if I want to open a bar on the beach of Costa Rica, but I want to educate my children in the United States, and I want my children with other people. Okay, those are two real wants, and you can have those, but then you have to figure out how you're reconciling them so one doesn't take over for the other, right? So, I mean, it's pretty complex, but if the other side of it is you're doing this now and you don't like it today, and you don't like it, and you're not structuring it as a stepping stone to get somewhere, literally, like you are, then no, that's a waste of time. Just stop. Don't even do it. Don't do it.
Nice. I appreciate that.
You won't get there. Yeah.
And I want to bring it back to something that we talked about right at the top of the show, and this is bringing it back to passion and bringing it back to personalities, because I think I'm in this group that is, as you described then, and my friends would attest to this, that I don't overtly get massively excited visually when I'm excited about something. So on the show and on camera, I try my best to be more animated about things, but it sometimes comes across a bit like weird and cheesy, and that's a skill set in itself, perhaps, that you can learn, and that's to do with charisma and a bunch of other things. But for the salespeople listening now who perhaps are like me, and you're naturally very animated, your passion comes across, and clearly you've worked on this for many years. You know exactly what you're passionate about, you know exactly what you're talking about, and so you can be very authentic with it. But for the salesperson listening, and I want to wrap up this part of the show with this, perhaps they are passionate about the product, but perhaps they are more introverted. They're not waving their arms about, and it doesn't come across to the prospects that they are as passionate as they are. Is there a way around this? Is that how they should be because it's authentic? Or should they be working on it as a skill to become more visibly passionate?
All right, I'm going to start with you. I don't know who gave you the feedback that you don't exude passion, because you do. Clearly you do. I can see it when you talk. I can see your hands are here now, but 2 seconds ago they were out here and they were going like this, right? So are you all over the place? No, but you can see the passion as you're talking, right? So I think, one, passion can be seen in different people. It doesn't have to, we don't have the same passion by, oh, he's not waving his arms, so he's not passionate. Like, yeah, I can totally see it. It's different than Keenan, and it's different than, Kira over here, but I can see the passion. So let's not perpetuate this idea that there's this passion threshold, and if you don't have it, you can't reach it, you don't have it. Passion, to me, is the emotional connection, that is visible emotional connection to the conversation you're having. And I have never met a person who I couldn't tell was passionate when they were passionate, right? I think what happens for a lot of people is they aren't in tune to the emotional connection. So one of the things I say to people is, I don't want you to be like, when I get passionate, I don't get passionate about a product per se, right? I get passionate about what that product could do. And one of the greatest examples of this is it's outcomes that I focus on. So I remember I was applying for my second real job, and it was with an IT consulting firm, right? And I didn't know anything about IT. They were interested in me because I had sold them a chamber membership at my last job, where I worked for the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, and they were like, this guy can sell, and he's only been doing it for a year. And so they were looking at a way to get me in, even though I had none of the credentials, none of the expertise. Well, I had the expertise, none of the experience. They were like, I don't know how to get this guy in, but I had worked my way to the final dinner. And this will all make sense in a second. Worked my way to the final dinner, and they asked me about Y2K. You remember Y2K? You're kind of young. So in 2000,
the bug.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is in 1997. It's 3 years before the bug, but everybody's starting to panic that everything might pop because of the 2-digit code, right? Well, I had never heard of that. So here I am sitting at the table with these people at an IT consulting firm, and they asked me about Y2K. I had never heard about it. So I'm thinking, I'm done. And I said, no. My head fell down, and I read, and they started explaining it to me. And I was like, and I popped up like, oh my God, you know how much money we could make? Oh my, there's got to be hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of companies who have, that was that's passion to me. Like, I instantly saw the opportunity. 10 minutes ago, I didn't get it. Now I saw it, and I'm like, oh, boom. I was emotionally connected to that opportunity. And that's what I mean. I think most people don't allow themselves to look forward and say, what is the impact of this? How can this help somebody? How is this going to change someone's feelings? How could this, and emotionally connect to that? And if you do, the rest is involuntary. The minute you emotionally connect to something, it's involuntary. So you just got to learn to connect the head with the heart.
Involuntary is the best way to describe that. I really enjoyed that, Keenan. And a final bit on this. How do we force ourselves to look forward? If that's key to it all, if being authentic and not trying to put on a charade, and me, for example, not waving my arms around like a lunatic, because that won't look congruent. If the solution is to look forward, how do we force ourselves to do that? Because it's very easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day, the moaning customers and all that kind of stuff.
Just attach yourself to the outcome of what you're in, right? So, if right now, I was like, the podcast with Will, I love this. This is a lot of fun. This is good conversation. So all I'm thinking about is the good conversation and the dialogue. So I'm now emotionally connected. This is going to be fun, right? If it's a product you sell, then emotionally connect yourself to the impact you could have on that organization, right? So then you get really good at asking discovery questions, because you realize you can't be too passionate until all of a sudden you hear them say, oh yeah, I'm making this up, we spend 6 months a year trying to reconcile our XYZ. Like, oh my, 6 months a year? If I could get that down to 3 weeks, how much would that help you? Are you kidding me? We get rid of 3 positions, we probably save $500,000 a year. Oh my, that excites me. Just telling the story, that excites me. Wow. But if you can't get emotionally connected to those types of things, then I can't help you. You have all kinds of emotional stunting issues.
You're probably a psychopath or a sociopath or something deeper on the level, which Keenan, the therapist, can't help on a single podcast. But But with that, Keenan, I've got a couple of questions to ask everyone that comes on the show. Some of these will be new to you as well. First one, and these, I've been saying this to everyone that comes on the show at the moment. These are quick fire questions, but you can either answer them quick or dive into them as you feel is appropriate. First one, paper books or reading books on a Kindle?
I used to say Kindle books, but I'm lying. Paper books. Okay. If I really want to learn it and retain it, I do better with paper. If I just want to whip through it, I can do the Kindle, but paper for me.
Nice. Dollar size if possible. What's the biggest deal you ever closed?
$35 million.
Nice. Next one. What is one book or resource other than your own, which we'll come on to, that you'd recommend to the Salesman podcast audience?
Revisionist History by Malcolm Gladwell. I'll tell you, he is my new hero. The man, he's my target. I want to meet and have dinner with that guy. His ability to tie research to real world problems is off the chart. And he's doing one right now that if I had the money, I would put in front of every person in this world. I started an entire nonprofit around getting this through people's heads. And he calls it the weak link, strong link in how you develop organizations or how you develop things. And the real quick of it is some research that went out, and you're going to love this as a soccer player. You should go listen to it. Is soccer a strong link or weak link sport? And what it means is, strong link means if you replace just one player, will you get more return? So David Beckham's old, but if you go get Messi or Ronaldo and spend all your money on them, is that beneficial for the soccer team, or is it about the worst player? And if you can just improve the worst player, which has the greatest impact? Soccer is a weak link sport because it's 11 guys. That person can't get the ball that much. And because one goal means so much that if you have one person who makes a mistake and you have a goal, you may not get that back, right? So the best, it's proven over and over, the best money to spend is not get Ronaldo. Take that money and improve your 4 worst players, and the soccer team will be exponentially better. Basketball in the United States is a strong link sport because there's only 5 of you and you have multiple times the score. So if you can get the ball in that person's hand, you can ultimately change it. And we've seen that, right? When one person gets that superstar, they always win. So he's taken that to life. And he's explained, at least in America, most of our policies in America are strong link. But you can't lift a country up, or you can't lift the society up in a strong link. And it talks about how more and more resources in this country go to a smaller group of people because we keep thinking strong link is the way to go. It's fascinating, my man. Sorry, I took us on a rant, but you got to get it. The man's a genius.
I'll check that out for sure. And talking about soccer, or as we call it, football, which is the proper name, and I'm slightly offended you were calling it soccer there, speaking to me, Keenan. But Leicester City is the perfect example of that, of how successful they've been through essentially some lucky players coming through at the right time and being talented, who were perhaps not big names before last season, but just the coaching and the team as a whole. That bottom 4 or 5 players getting better as opposed to having that Messi or Ronaldo. So I appreciate that. And final one of these, Keenan, what does the first 60 minutes of your day look like?
Laying in bed, going through all my social channels on my phone.
Is that I might poke something out here, but is that because you're addicted to social media? Is that because it's the most useful and best time to do it?
Because I think it starts, so I get up rather than hitting snooze or rolling over for another 10 or 15 minutes. It allows me to basically connect with anybody who I haven't been connected with for the last 6, 7, 8 hours, however long I've been off. So I check my email right away, check all my social streams, respond to anybody who's responded, respond to any email that came in over that needs right away, and then get in the shower.
Nice. And follow-up question to this is, even more so than passion, even more so than everything we talked about today's show, is responsiveness probably the most important thing in sales right now?
That's a great question. No.
Leave it there. Leave it there, Keenan, because we'll cover this on a future episode because I think it's something that is lacking. I am terrible at replying to emails, as everyone knows who listens and gets in contact, audience and otherwise. So we'll get your thoughts on that on another episode. And final question, something I've asked everyone to come on the show. I've asked you before, so I'm going to slightly twist it around. If you could sit down with every single person who's listening right now and offer them one piece of advice that would have to go across every single discipline, every single industry, what would be that one piece of sales advice you'd offer Sales Nation?
Sales advice. Sales advice. Okay, it would be this. Become so knowledgeable in the space industry that you sell in and of the products that people use in that space. Become so knowledgeable of that space in its totality, 360-degree knowledge, that if you wanted, you could successfully become an independent consultant in that space.
Love it. I totally agree with that. And that leads us nicely onto your book. Keenan, tell us a little bit about Not Taught, where we can find it, and then, of course, where we can find out more about you as well.
Yeah, so Not Taught, what it takes to be successful. Look at that. I got a copy right here. Look at that. Just sitting right there. Ta-da. What it takes to be successful in the 21st century that nobody's teaching you. It is quick shot. It's basically how the 21st century has changed the rules to the game, how access to information has undermined all the things that our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, our schools told us about being successful are changing or have completely changed or no longer relevant. But no one's telling us. We're still operating from that. And this book helps you understand what's changed, how you can leverage that to be successful.
And what I like about it, and I've read it recently, and it alludes to what you just mentioned then of if information isn't important, your personal brand becomes even more valuable as a differentiator between you, your competition, and even products in the market as they become more and more commoditized, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You are a product, right? In the industrial age, you couldn't hide. I mean, you could hide. The only way someone knew about you is if someone told you or that you sent them a resume or you didn't exist, right? You wouldn't have found me. I wouldn't have found you. There was no really way to find us. Some people wrote a book, but those are few and far between. And even then, to write a book, you had to get a publisher to agree to publish it. So even in those cases, but now you can get access to the entire world. People can find you like that. So you better make sure they can find you, and better make sure that what they find is damn good.
Amazing. Keenan, I want to thank you for, very personally for your candid responses on today's episode and for your insights and opening up a little bit here. I appreciate that, mate. I really do. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman podcast.
Of course, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
And there we have it. Thank you, Keenan, for coming on the show. Appreciate your time. As always, we'll be doing more of these, I'm sure, in the not too distant future. Thank you, Sales Nation, for tuning in. I massively appreciate it. There'd be no show without you guys sharing your attention. And so, with all that said, I'll speak with you all again tomorrow.